Hi everyone, Richard Wong here. So in this video, I'm going to talk about the settings and features in the Huawei smartphone camera app. And I'm also going to share with you the settings I normally use when I'm taking photo using the Huawei smartphone. So while I'm using Huawei P20 Pro to demonstrate the settings and features in this video, the information in this video can also be applied to any other Huawei premium smartphone, no matter you're using a Mate 10, Mate 10 Pro, P10, P9 or any other upcoming Huawei smartphone, because basically while the user interface may change a little bit between different phones, the feature and setting themselves fundamentally are the same. So yes, all the information in this video can also be applied to any other Huawei premium smartphone. There are a lot of settings and features I need to cover in this video, so let's get started. I have just launched the camera app that comes with your Huawei smartphone. So basically you can see the photo in the middle. There are some controls on the left hand side and then there are some controls on the right hand side. The controls on the right hand side are usually the controls that you don't need to change very often, and the one on the left hand side are the one that you probably will change more often, especially if you don't want to shoot it in just fully auto mode. So let's go through the settings on the right first. At the top you have the flash settings. I think by default it comes at auto, but to me I love to I want to keep it at the off, because normally I don't like using the on-camera flash when taking photos. So I would normally turn it to off, and I only turn it on if I really have to. But because the smartphone's low light performance is getting better and better, so I found that the need to shoot with the flash on is not very often these days. So the next one is the moving picture. So if you enable it when you take a photo, then you will also capture a very short video clip. I think it's about 2-3 seconds that is stored together with the photo, so you can see a little bit of animation with the static photo. I normally don't use this feature, so I will turn it off as well. And then the next one is quite important, especially if you are just shooting JPEG. Basically, this is the color profile or the color setting for the photos. The top one is standard, so that's like a more normal setting that is suitable for most people. And then you have the vivid, which means higher saturation, higher contrast. So if you are taking maybe landscape photo, or you just prefer to have higher contrast, then you choose that one. And then you have the smooth color, which is somewhere between the vivid mode and the standard color mode. So it's got a little bit more color saturation and contrast than standard, but not as strong as vivid. Personally, I quite like to use smooth color mode because it's suitable for a wide range of photos, from portrait to landscape to just street photo. It's all quite suitable. And then the last one, the gear button, is it will bring up the settings screen. In here, then you have tons of settings that you can set. Some of the most important settings is like the resolution at the top, and then GPS I normally turn on, especially good when you are traveling, so you can see where you take some photos. Master AI I turn it on, and this one, assistive grid, I think is very important. You should turn it on. I think the grid one is the most useful one, because when you turn it to grid, now if I go back to the screen, then you can see, you know, there's like a grid like this, divided into 3x3. So you may have heard of a composition rule called the rule of thirds. Basically, you can put your subject, your main subject, at the 1/3 line or the intersection of the 1/3 line, and that gives you a nice looking photo. For example, if I take a photo like this, I may put that little house here at that area, so it's like 1/3 instead of right at the center. So yeah, that with that grid, it will help you to compose your photo to look nicer, and also help you to make sure your horizon is level, because it has the horizontal and vertical line for you to align it with the horizontal or vertical line in the scene. Let's see what are the other one that is quite good. Okay, there's a timer mode, so if you put your phone on a tripod, you can turn on the timer mode, so you can do a timer photo. Touch to capture. If you turn on touch to capture, basically it means when you tap on the screen, then it will take the photo for you automatically and immediately, instead of you have to press the shutter button.
So yeah, give it a try on all the settings on this screen. Some of them can be really useful for you, depends on how you take your photos. Okay, now let's go back to the main screen. Um, the photo mode is the normal mode that you start when you are taking photos. As you can see on the left, it says blue sky because I have turned on the master AI and the camera recognizes I am shooting a scene with blue sky. So you will automatically apply some settings to, that it think is most suitable for this kind of photo. But if you don't like it, what you can do is just tap on the cross button there and you will cancel it and it will change back to the default setting. I think most of people know how to use the normal photo mode. On the P20 Pro, because it has a telephoto lens on it, so what you can do is that you can tap on this 1x button and it will turn to the telephoto mode. You can turn to 3 times, that's a 3 times optical zoom. And then you can turn to 5 times, which is the hybrid zoom. Now notice the picture is actually pretty stable for a 5 times zoom because the camera has optical image stabilizer on the telephoto lens. And if you want to zoom in even more, what you can do is that you can pinch the screen and then extend it, and then you can go all the way to 10 times zoom. Now when you are shooting at 10 times zoom, the image quality will be not as good as 3 times or 5 times because it's using quite a bit of digital zoom, which means there will be a loss in quality. So let's go back to the 1 time zoom. Like for example, this photo you are looking at now, it looks quite dark because it's quite a high contrast scene, and the camera is trying to make sure the highlights is not overexposed, and that makes the foreground quite a bit underexposed, so it's quite dark. So what you can do is that you can when you tap on the screen, there is a sun icon next to it, and then you can drag it up or down to make it brighter or darker and to adjust it to what you want. But one thing you have to be careful is that this is only a temporary changes. So as soon, for example, if I adjust to 2.1, so it's super bright, it's quite overexposed. If I tap on another area again, like I tap on here, it would automatically reset it back to 0. So be careful if you're using that one to adjust the brightness. Make sure you take the photo immediately after that. Now there's another way to change the exposure in this photo mode, and basically what you do is that if you think your photo is too bright, you tap on somewhere that is really bright in the scene but at the same distance from the main object. For example, in this one, now it's too dark. Then what I do is that do the opposite thing. I tap on somewhere that is a lot darker. So for example, I tap on this area and it will bring the photo to quite a bit brighter, and vice versa. If I think the photo now is too bright, what I can do is that I can tap on the brightest area, and for example this one, and that will make the photo darker. So yeah, it seems a bit backwards, but this is how it does. So tap on the bright area to make the photo darker, and tap on the dark area to make the photo brighter. Okay, so that's basically the normal photo mode. And now you can move up, and this is the portrait mode. Unfortunately, I don't have any model that I can show you this mode right now, but basically you have 3 things. The first one is that on the top left is the artistic bokeh, which means it will help you blur the background if you turn it on. So when you take a portrait, you see the background is blurred. The second one in the middle is a new feature that comes with the P20 Pro. Basically, it will try to change the lighting of the portrait and just give you a different look of the photo. I've tried it a little bit, but personally I don't find it to be really useful, so I'm not really using it much right now. But yeah, feel free to experiment with it and see whether it works well for you or not. So the last one is the beauty level. So basically it would just try to apply some skin softening to the the person you are taking photo of. If you turn to 10, then it will try to massively soften the skin of the person you are taking photo of, and 0 means that it doesn't apply any softening. I think on the previous Huawei smartphone you can choose between 0 to 5. I may be wrong, so correct me if I'm wrong. but from the P20, P20 Pro onwards, you can choose between 0 to 10. So normally when I'm taking portrait photo, I will leave it to maybe around 2 to 3 because that helps soften the skin slightly, but it doesn't make it look too fake. But yeah, experiment with it and see what you like the most because it's quite personal what's the setting you want. The next one is the aperture mode. So the aperture mode is quite similar to the portrait mode in the way that it will try to blur the background behind your subject, or even blur the foreground in front of your subject. So it makes it look like it's a photo that captured on a large sensor camera like a DSLR with a fast lens. And here you can adjust how much blur you want. For example, if I am taking like this, I set a focus point here first, and then I can adjust the blur. If I adjust it, you see, to a small value, the background will look really blur. And if I adjust it to a larger number, the background is not so blur. So normally when I want to take photo with the background blurred, even if it's a portrait, I would prefer to use this one instead of the portrait mode, because with the aperture mode, the good thing is after you capture the photo, you can go back and then edit how much blur you want for the background, and also change the focus point if you didn't get it quite right at the beginning. That is a very good feature, because if you run it in the portrait mode, basically you let the camera to completely control the background blur, where is the focus point and everything, etc. Most of the time it get it quite good, but sometimes it doesn't get it exactly right. So if you shoot in portrait mode, then there's not much you can do after you took the photo. But if you capture in aperture mode, then you can go back and adjust the settings you want. Now the only thing is that if you capture in the aperture mode, then you can't use the beauty skin features. If you keep going, then you have the video mode, pretty straightforward. And then you have the Pro mode, which is probably one of the most important feature in the camera app if you want to capture some very nice looking photo. So let me explain to you what are the different settings in the Pro mode. So you see, when I enable the Pro mode, you now have a secondary menu option on the screen. So the first one is the metering. Basically, it just tell the camera how to set the correct brightness of the photo you are taking. By default, it's in the matrix mode, which means the camera will use the whole screen to determine the brightness of the photo. So if you have something really bright at the corner of the scene, you will also take that into consideration. The second one is center weighted. So it will use the center area to determine the exposure level of the photo, but it will still use the surrounding area to adjust the exposure slightly. Now the last one is called spot metering. So this one, it will only use a very small area near the center to determine the correct exposure level of the photo. So for example, if I turn this one up to the sky, it should, and I tap on it, it should make the scene quite a bit darker. And if I turn it to the dark area here, and you see the camera is now, make sure the object in the center is correctly exposed, but it means the surrounding area may be too bright. If I change back to matrix metering mode, now if I turn the camera around, it will still change slightly, but you see the effect is not as big as before. You can pay attention to the shutter speed. You can see it's changing when I'm moving the camera around, but it's not changing too dramatically because it's still trying to take into consideration of the whole scene. While if I change back to spot metering, then you can see the camera speed, the shutter speed would change dramatically depending on where I'm pointing to. If I'm pointing to really dark area, it will go quite slow. And if I point to bright area, it will change to very fast shutter speed. Okay, let me change it back to matrix metering. Now the next one is the ISO. It just tell the camera what's the ISO you're using. ISO means how much the camera is trying to boost the signal that it receives. A lower number means the image quality is better. The higher number means you can capture photo in dark area, but the image quality won't be as good. Normally, I leave it in auto because the camera does a pretty good job in determining the correct ISO that I need for the photo. But sometimes when I want to have full manual control, then I will adjust the ISO setting and also shutter speed and other things as well. Now, the next one is the shutter speed. This control how long the exposure is for each photo. Normally, it is in the auto value, but you can choose it from 1 to 1/4000, which is really fast, to something very slow. For example, I think it's up to 30 seconds. That means the photo will take 30 seconds to expose, and in this case, you see when I change to 30 seconds, the photo is completely overexposed. So normally you can also just leave it in auto, because for most kind of normal photos, auto is fine. But when you are capturing something that moves, then you would want to adjust the shutter speed yourself, because if the shutter speed is slow, then you will capture some motion blur in your photo, which may be exactly what you want, but it may not be. So sometimes you want to freeze your action, then you will want to choose a fast shutter speed, for example 1/1000. So I'm going to show you two photos that I capture at different shutter speeds. So one is very high shutter speed, so you can see everything's frozen in the photo. And if I shot at slow shutter speed, then you can see you got quite a bit of motion blur, which can help you capture some sense of motion. Next one is the EV. Remember I previously said if you tap on the screen and then there's a sun icon next to it, that's what you have when you are shooting in the photo mode. But if you are capturing in the pro mode, then what you use is the EV value. So if you turn it up to positive value, it will brighten the scene, and if you go to the negative, it will darken the scene. So yeah, you can use this one to control the brightness of the photo that you are capturing. Next one is the autofocus mode. Normally I just leave it on AFC because it does a pretty good job. When you point to something, it will immediately focus on that thing. Like now, point to the near object and then point to the far object, near object, far object. But sometimes you don't want the camera to change the focus for you, then you can either do it in the AFS mode. That means you have to tap the screen for it to adjust the focus, or MF mode, which means you actually manually control the focus distance using the slider here. The last one is the white balance menu, which means you tell the camera what sort of lighting condition you are under, and then it will make the photo look good. For example, right now it's in AWB, which means auto white balance. If you change it to cloudy, it means it's now a cloudy day, which is exactly what it is right now. So the color looks good. But if I change it to something else, like the tungsten here, this one, tungsten. So you're telling the camera, I'm actually inside a room with tungsten light, which is very yellow. But in fact, right now, the light, the ambient light is not that yellow. So that means the result is that the photo I got is opposite to yellow, which is very bluish. Again, this one, you can normally just leave it at auto white balance. But if it doesn't work well, then you choose one of those. Or you can choose the last one, which means you can manually adjust what's the white balance you want to get the best, the most correct color in your photo. So let me set it back to here. And now another thing is when you switch to Pro mode, and then you can go to the settings menu, and now here you can enable the raw output. So I enable it, then it will give you the 14 megapixel raw in DNG format output. So if you want the best post-processing ability, then you can enable the RAW format. Now, one thing you need to know is that when you enable the RAW format, the RAW output is always 14 megapixel, regardless of what resolution you're choosing here. This setting only affects the JPEG output. So if you choose 10 megapixel here, and you enable RAW, that means it will give you a 10 megapixel JPEG and a 40 megapixel RAW. And next we go to more, and that will show you another list of features. So in the older Huawei smartphone, if you swipe from the left to the right, then you can see a grid menu with a lot of these secondary features. But from the P20 Pro onwards, then it become like a secondary menu here. So at top you have the slow motion, you have the night shot, monochrome, light painting, HDR, time-lapse filter, panorama, field panorama, etc. And the night shot, monochrome, and light painting are the one I use the most. The night shot, so basically in the night shot mode, it allows you to take some very nice long exposure handheld photo. While you normally, if you want to take a nice long exposure photo, you have to put it on the tripod to avoid camera shake. But somehow Huawei managed to do some very clever tricks, so allow you to do that without using a tripod. And okay, let's go back there. And the monochrome mode, as you can expect, it just switch to the monochrome camera on the Huawei smartphone. Most of the high-end Huawei smartphone has a 20 megapixel monochrome sensor camera on it. So if you enable that, then you capture photo from the monochrome sensor. Now you can see there are quite a few different secondary options when you are in monochrome mode. So normal, aperture, portrait, and pro, which is basically what you already have from the main screen. But you know, when you are in monochrome mode, you can't go back to there. So they put a secondary menu here. And let's talk about the light painting mode. So this one is probably one of my favorite in the Huawei camera app. So to use this mode, you have to put your camera on a tripod or something very steady, because basically it would take a long exposure shot, or I should say more correctly is that it would take hundreds or thousands of photos within the time period, and then blend them together using one of the options you want. They all have slightly different effect, and you can have a look at my long exposure video, just show you how I took some of the beautiful long exposure photo at the Murirai beach here in Auckland, New Zealand. So this is definitely one of my favorite feature in the Huawei camera app, because it allows me to take some very beautiful landscape photo without using a DSLR mirrorless camera and a bunch of anti-filter. This is very good, and you definitely should give it a try. And there are a lot other features in this secondary screen. So yeah, have a try and experiment with all this mode and see what sort of photo you manage to capture with the camera app.
So hopefully after watching this video, you will have some better understanding of the features and settings on the Huawei smartphone camera app. I hope you found this video useful. If there are some settings and features that you want me to expand a bit more, feel free to leave a comment below and I will try to answer your questions. Thank you again for watching this video, and I will see you next time.